When writing an essay, it can be a challenge to get started.
I use the acronym BUG, where you box the command word, for example, outline or evaluate.
Explain, justify, give evidence.
This allows us to determine what the question is asking us to do.
Then underline any keywords you can refer to.
This allows you to determine how much and what you need to write in an essay.
And finally, glance back at the question as many times as you like during your writing to help you keep focused on what you're being asked to do.
Before starting an essay, I always like to plan.
The plan doesn't have to be long. It can just be a few sentences to trigger your memory.
First, I will brainstorm the subject area by making a mind map.
Mind mapping, to me, is the best way to prepare for writing an essay, to get all of your ideas down onto one bit of paper.
After that, I'll skim through any course material or lecture handouts and start to build a more detailed outline.
And once you have a plan, you can work out what your introduction is going to be, what your point for and point against is going to be.
I would then start with a introduction, just a paragraph, 4 lines or so. It doesn't need to be long.
I rewrite the question almost in my introduction to make it clear exactly what I'm writing about.
Clearly justifying what your assignment is going to explain.
The indication of how many paragraphs I will need depends on how many marks in the question.
You will mark for your spelling, grammar and coherent structure, and the order matters.
Making sure that each paragraph has a certain point to it and I'm not just waffling on.
And then always have the conclusion at the end. And always refer back to the points you've made already.
So make sure you answer the whole question by going through each bit and ticking them off.
Once you've planned your essay, you should have a clearer idea on how you're actually going to structure your writing. Make sure it's logical and academically concise.
I structure the arguments I am making using the point, evidence, explain format.
Point is you make your point. Make sure that your point is clear.
The first part is making your point. Here you need to make a statement which isn't too long about the subject of the question, making sure to clearly point out what you're trying to say.
You then use evidence. So this is evidence to back up your point.
Next, you have to provide the evidence, which is usually a quotation. Look for quotations with language devices like metaphors, similes, and oxymorons. Your quotation must be relevant to what you have already said and must be of appropriate length, not too long and not too short.
And then explain. So you're explaining why you believe that this statement is either true or false, and your own opinion and your own insight to this statement.
Lastly, we have explain. Explain why you have chosen the quotation you're using, what it shows, what it implies, and what it can mean. How does it make the reader feel? Always make sure to use complex, sophisticated, formal language to help your points come across as well thought out and researched.
Since doing my A-levels, I've realised that you needed to add an extra thing onto PEE. I do point, evidence, explain, link.
The strategy I use when writing an essay is PEEL. Point, evidence, explain and link.
You link to the question more, you can add that extra bit of detail. It just makes sure that you're always linking back to the question.
Link back to the question. For example, if the question asks you to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of something, you could end your paragraph by saying, therefore this is a strength or weakness.
Link is a mini conclusion at the end of the paragraph that links to the question to show that the paragraph is relevant to what the question is asking.
This structure can be repeated for each paragraph and used to identify how much you have to write. I also make a plan to identify what points I'm going to use in each paragraph. This allows me to be more confident and concise with my answers.
It's always important to have a counter argument as well, just so it's a bit more balanced and not as biased. That way, whoever's reading the essay will get the full understanding of the question and what you're trying to answer.
Definitely look at both sides of the argument. So I like to use something called 2 hands and an eye. So on one hand, you explain one part of the argument, and then on the other hand, you explain the next part, which is the opposite side, and then I think, which is your conclusion, where you sum it up. So definitely use that, as having both sides of the argument and then a conclusion is really helpful in your argument and in your essay, as it just makes it easier to evaluate it.
So in my course, I had to do a few presentations. I know presentations can be really daunting if you're not very confident and you don't like speaking in front of a group of people. But I promise if you prepare, you'll stand up there and present and it will be an absolute flow and you will not even think about having to speak in front of people.
Good preparation will ensure that you have thought carefully about the messages that you want to communicate to your audience. When preparing a presentation, make sure to consider the subject matter, the audience, the length of the talk, the aim, and how you will get your points across.
If you forget anything during presentations, it might be a good idea to create flashcards of useful trigger words.
Write down on flashcards the start of the sentence for each section. This will give you a prompt, so if you do lose where you are, your flashcards will be there in front of you. Even if you don't use them, they are there in case you do completely freeze and you've lost track of where you are.
I practice giving the presentation in front of my family so that they can tell me what I can do to make my points clearer.
Just talk to a wall, talk to your room, just verbally getting it out is really good because it can evoke the senses, and also writing it down, you'll remember it more, and that means that you'll feel more confident. When you feel anxious and less prepared, then usually you have a poorer presentation.
If you're in a group presentation, everyone should work in a way that shows a fair amount of effort from all members. Presentation isn't just about appearance, like you can make something look pretty, which adds to it, but the key to a good presentation is the content. Make it fun and engaging to read. If you want to be more creative, you can use pictures, diagrams and video clips to evoke the different learning styles of viewers.
I do practicals in chemistry and physics which are assessed, so my main tips for these would be to read the instructions a couple of times before starting. Be aware of your hazards and wear safety clothing, and when planning practicals, list all the equipment you'll need and write a thorough method that someone else can understand and use.
In my course there's a lot of practicals. One of them is I had to lead my group walking across a mountain. I had to brush up on my map reading skills. So I had to know how to use a compass, and I had to know how to take bearings, and I had to know how to measure distance and time. So make sure when you're preparing to have the skills that you need. So for example with mine, I needed to have compass reading skills. Another thing I did is I didn't stress, and I always asked for help when I needed it, and also don't leave it to the last minute.
When proofreading your work, keep in mind what the marker of your essay is most likely to look for. Make sure you have shown that you're able to find relevant information, structure your knowledge clearly and concisely, analyse processes and problems, and be persuasive and argue a case. Always make sure that all of the points you have made relate to the original question, as that is the only way you can be awarded a good grade for your essay.
As you are reading it through, follow where you are reading with a finger or underline as you go, so you're more likely to be able to pick up on any errors in your work.
I would definitely recommend to not skim it. You have to make sure that you read through it very, very carefully and word by word, otherwise you might miss something.
When proofreading my work, I will leave it to the day after I've completed it so I have fresh eyes to notice any problems more easily. As well as this, I will read it out loud as a script so I can easily find where there is any grammar or spelling mistakes, as it will be harder to read.
Also get somebody else to read it to you, because often what you think you've written, you haven't, and when you read it back, you read what you think you've written. So if you have somebody else read it to you, you'll be able to hear your mistakes.
So one thing I do to proofread my work before I send it off is I copy and paste the whole thing into Google Translate, therefore it speaks it back to me, so I can clearly listen to see if I've made a mistake, or if a word's spelt wrong, or if I've missed out a word in a sentence.
I use spell and grammar check on Word, because a lot of my assignments I do on the computer, so that's quite good to just filter through, and then I'll kind of go along behind it and just read out loud so I know it makes sense, and then I can pick up on any errors I've made.
I would also highly recommend an app called Grammarly.
Grammarly is a really great resource for scanning your work and catching any common grammatical mistakes like misused commas and misplaced modifiers. It also gives you detailed explanations for all of your mistakes and helps you avoid making them again in the future.
And that's a wrap. Thank you very much for giving up your time to watch our videos of us explaining and giving you the best advice possible. We hope that it has really benefited you in any way. We hope you're keeping well and keeping safe during these times, and hopefully sooner or later we'll all be back at college.